You know that feeling when you're filling up your tank, watching those numbers just spin and spin, and you think to yourself, where is all this money actually going? Well, if you've ever asked that question, you've come to the right place. We are going to decode your fuel bill. It's a question that honestly millions of us ask every single time we go to the pump. The price always seems to be going up, but the why of it all, that's usually a complete mystery. So what's the real story behind that final number you pay? Okay, let's put a real number on this to get started. We're going to use the petrol price in Delhi as our example, which lands us at 94 rupees and 77 paise. This number right here is the starting point for our entire investigation. We're about to peel back every single layer of that price. Seriously, by the end of this, you're going to know exactly where every rupee and paisa goes. So first up, let's get a bird's eye view of the main things you're paying for. When you look at it from a high level, the breakdown is actually pretty simple. Your money splits into three main buckets. The biggest chunk, about 55%, is the actual base price of the fuel. Then you've got a whopping 40% for government taxes, and finally, a small 5% slice for the dealer who runs the petrol pump. All right, let's zoom in on that second biggest piece of the pie, because it's a big one, the taxes. Just think about that for a second. For every 100 rupees you spend on petrol, around 40 of those rupees go directly to the government. This isn't a small piece of the puzzle. It's a massive part of the whole story. And here's the actual math. The base price for the fuel starts at about 52 rupees. But then, the layering begins. The central government adds its cut, nearly 22 rupees in something called excise duty. And then the state government adds its cut, which is over 15 rupees in VAT. That's a grand total of over 38 rupees in just taxes, piled on top of a product that only cost 52 rupees to start with. So, okay, taxes are obviously a huge factor. But what about that base price itself? I mean, where does that 52 rupee number even come from in the first place? Well, that base price is basically a four-step journey. It all starts with the cost of importing raw crude oil. That's the biggest chunk, about 35 rupees per liter. Then it costs about 3 rupees to refine that crude into petrol. After that, the oil companies add their profit margin, and finally, about 2 more rupees are tacked on for transporting the fuel to a local storage depot. And remember, all of this happens before a single rupee of tax is even applied. Now, this is where things can get a little confusing. You might have heard that India exports oil, which sounds weird since we're always talking about how much we import. Let's clear that up right now. But the difference is actually simple, but it's absolutely critical. Think of India as a massive factory. We import the raw material, that's the crude oil, and we export the finished product, which is the refined fuel like petrol and diesel. We don't sell the raw stuff, we sell the fancy value-added version. And believe me, it is a huge business. Even though India has to import over 80% of its raw crude, we have one of the world's largest refining industries. We export something like 70 million tons of finished fuel every single year, often by buying discounted crude from places like Russia, processing it, and then selling it on to big markets in Europe and the US. So with all that going on, how do our prices at the pump stack up against other countries? Let's take a quick look. When you look at the final price you pay, you can see India is kind of sitting in the middle of this particular group. Cheaper than the US, yeah, but way more expensive than an oil-producing country like the UAE. But why? Why is the UAE so much cheaper? And here is the answer. Just look at the difference in the taxes. India's tax per liter is more than 5 times higher than what they pay in the UAE. This right here is the single biggest reason for that massive price gap. This quote really just says it all. The difference isn't the cost of oil, it's the cost of government. The basic cost to get oil and turn it into fuel is pretty similar around the world. It's what the government decides to add on top that creates these huge price swings you see from country to country. And countries like the UAE can afford to keep their taxes super low because of something called oil wealth. Basically, they make so much money from exporting their own crude oil that they just don't need to tax their own citizens heavily on fuel. In fact, a lot of the time, they even use that money to make it cheaper through subsidies. Okay, so let's bring this all home. After looking at all of this, what are the key things to remember? So really, it all boils down to this. Your fuel bill is a pretty simple recipe with just 3 main ingredients. A little over half is the base price of the fuel itself. Then you've got that heavy 40% that goes to government taxes. And finally, there's that tiny fraction for the dealer. And at the end of the day, it's a trade-off, right? Those high taxes we all pay are a major source of revenue that helps fund everything in the country, from roads to schools. The rest of the price, well, that's set by the complicated dance of global oil markets and what the big companies decide to charge. So the next time you find yourself at the petrol pump, it's worth asking yourself, what are you really paying for here? Is it just energy to get from A to B? Or is it a little piece of the country's infrastructure, its national development, and even India's strategy on the world stage? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.